everyone. Today, I want to welcome Nancy Harhut to my expert interview series. Nancy is a top 40 digital strategist, a keynote speaker, and the co-founder of HBT Marketing, a consultancy that focuses on driving customer engagement using behavioral science. Nancy is the author of an award-winning book, Using Behavioral Science in Marketing, Driving Customer Action and Loyalty by Prompting Instinctive Responses. Welcome, Nancy. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Well, we've got a number of questions. If you're ready, we can jump right in.
Sounds great.
Where did this all start for you? How did you get into marketing, and what got you interested in behavioral science in particular?
So, it's funny. I thought that I was going to be a journalist, and that's what I went to school for. And entering my senior year of college, I realized as I looked at some of my friends, they had a fire in their belly about journalism that I didn't have. I would be technically proficient, but I just couldn't see myself, shoving a microphone in someone's face and saying, "Hey, that's your house burning down. How do you feel about that?" This isn't going to be for me. So I scrambled and I took all these other communications courses and graduated and found myself a career in marketing and advertising, which was great. And, found that I really liked it and was moving along, climbing the ranks. And a colleague recommended a book to me. It was Robert Cialdini's Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And I read that, and that just opened up the whole area of behavioral science to me. And I just went down that rabbit hole, and I got my hands on any other book, any research I could find. And, I'd be making margin notes and underlining things and highlighting things, always thinking about what I was working on for my clients. What was the challenge I was trying to solve for them? And I'm like, oh, this could work and this could work. And so I started to test it. And it started to work. And I was like, all right, my sense was correct that behavioral science is out there. It's being used in government and politics and education and healthcare, but it should be used in marketing too. And there's a huge opportunity for us to do this. So I was using it. I was seeing that it was working, and just never looked back. And so kind of hung out my shingle on that and said, all right, this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on taking marketing best practices and adding to those marketing best practices behavioral science to create kind of a 1-2 punch to increase the likelihood that people will do what my clients want them to do. And ultimately had the opportunity to write the book Using Behavioral Science in Marketing. I did that, and that allowed me to share,
right here. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, there it is. It allowed me to share everything that I've learned over the last, 10, 12 years working in this field, experimenting with it, testing it. And so it's 17 chapters, and it has, I think, my 25 or so go-to behavioral science principles that have worked, time and time again for my clients, B2B and B2C, and non-for-profit for that matter. So that's it in kind of a nutshell.
To be effective, your book recommends that instead of focusing on what we want to say as companies, brands, marketers, we have to focus on what our prospects want to hear. And my background in particular is B2B technology companies. Why do you think this is such a struggle for B2B innovators in particular?
Well, you know what, Aaron, it's a struggle for a lot of companies, a lot of brands and marketers. And I think it comes down to the fact that we love our products. We genuinely love our products, and we want to tell people all about them because we really do believe in them. And we feel that if people knew as much as we did, they too would love them as much as we do. And we're so enthusiastic that we just want to get it all out there. The problem is not everyone wants to hear everything we want to say. People have a very specific need. They're looking at things through a particular lens, and we're much better off trying to focus on what people want to hear as opposed to what we want to tell them. Because if we come at them with too much information, they'll just say uncle and they'll move on to someone else. They're looking for something very specific. They have a problem they want to solve. They have a goal that they want to achieve. And we need to couch our message in those terms. It doesn't mean we can't talk about all the features and benefits that we bring to the table, but we have to do them through the right lens. We have to serve them up the right way so that people feel that they're finding what they're looking for, and they're not just encountering, the wall of words that we want to send their way, that tsunami of information.
You have an interesting background. You mentioned some of it, but you've also worked with direct response marketing. Can you describe for us what that is and how it differs from other marketing approaches? Any stories you might want to share from that line of work?
Yeah, sure. So, when I first started out, the advertising world, if you will, was divided into two. There was brand marketing, and then there was direct response marketing. And brand marketing was the bigger, sexier thing. And it's, this, it's the TV spots we see and the print ads that we see. And it was all about changing attitude and awareness over time. Right. So you wanted to build brand awareness, you wanted to build category preference, you wanted to build brand preference, and and that happens over time. And that was great. But then there was a kind of we used to be called the redheaded stepchild, but there was a direct marketing group. And we were more about changing behavior in the moment. So we weren't changing attitude and awareness over time. We wanted to change behavior in the moment. So we wanted to sell off the page. So it was a direct response print ad. It was a direct mail piece. Ultimately, it became email and then social. But it was more about getting that initial response, getting someone to pick up the phone, or go to the website, walk into the store, make that purchase, or give up some data about themselves, but have some kind of an action. So you can call it direct response, you can call it relationship marketing, you can call it performance marketing. It's gone by many, database marketing. It's gone by many names as it's evolved. But it was the big difference is, rather than just changing your attitude and awareness over time, we're trying to get that immediate response. And brand advertising helps, because if there's a good solid brand out there, it makes it easier for us to get that immediate response. So the two can work in concert. And there are times when, companies say, look, I can't choose between building my brand and building my business. I need to do them both at the same time. And you certainly can, and that's not a bad thing to do. It's just that my end of it benefited from the work that the brand people did. It reinforced and extended the message that the brand people had in the marketplace, but it was really focused on getting that immediate response.
In your book, you say that behavioral science is the study of why people do what they do, and that people don't actually make decisions, they default to decision-making shortcuts. So what is the implication of decision-making shortcuts for marketers like me?
Well, so we think that we make well thought out, well considered decisions. Right? I think it. I'm sure you think it. By extension, we think our customers and our prospects think it. We like to feel that when we make a decision, it's an informed decision and we know why we're doing it. And if somebody asks us, we'll point to something and say, oh, I chose them because they had a great brand reputation, or I chose them because they had, a larger storage capacity or a quicker, implementation procedure. We'll point to something that makes good logical sense. But the truth of the matter is, very often we're making decisions for reasons that we're not even aware of. We're using these decision-making shortcuts because we can't possibly analyze every bit of information before making a decision, or we'd never get around to making any. So instead, we've developed these hardwired behaviors, and we just default to them. And it helps us conserve mental energy, which is almost like a biological imperative for humans. Like we don't want to expend a ton of energy. So we develop these hardwired automatic behaviors. We cruise along through life on autopilot. We encounter a situation and we just default to that behavior, giving the matter at hand little, if any, thought. So what that means to us as marketers is we need to realize that that's what's happening with our customers and prospects. And as much as we want to give them, the logical, rational reasons to buy, we also have to, factor in some of these decision-making shortcuts that they're going to be using. In B2B, we like to think, oh, it's devoid of emotion. It's devoid of personal stake. It's all about what's best for the company. And certainly people are making decisions that are best for the company, but mixed in there is, am I going to get home to my spouse? Or am I going to be stuck here late at night? Is this going to be easy for me to get through the company? Or are people going to dislike me because of it? If it goes south, am I going to lose my job or lose my professional standing because I was the one who backed this particular solution? So these things that, B2B marketers don't necessarily always think about actually do factor into our target's decision-making process, if you will, or their decision-making shortcuts. And we need to be aware of them, because if we are, it helps us create more effective marketing campaigns, more effective messaging.
I do want to dig into some of those behavioral science-backed techniques that you mentioned in your book. But before we do, I want to ask a question that may be on some folks' minds. I know it was on my mind as I dove into this topic. Where do you stand on the ethics of using behavioral science in marketing? Where do you draw the line?
That's a great question. And I think where I draw the line is we're talking about motivating, not manipulating. So properly used, behavioral science is just one more tool in the toolbox, one more arrow in the quiver, choose your cliche. But, it's like when email first came out, we would just blast everybody. And now we realize that's not a good thing to do. And so we've gotten much better at targeting, right? We've got tools that help us more tightly define our audience and get the message to them at the right time and at the right place. So behavioral science is one more tool, right? It's not a magic wand. It's not going to allow you to get, 100% response all of the time. It doesn't work that way, but it will increase the likelihood that you can attract somebody's attention, that you can get them to understand your message, that you can get them to remember it and respond to it. And, so we want to use that tool, but we want to use it ethically. We want to use it responsibly. Don't do anything that is untrue. Don't do anything that, wouldn't pass the, oh, I wouldn't do this to my mother or my children or my spouse, or I wouldn't want this to happen to me. As long as we're being truthful and honest, what we're really doing is we're helping people to come to a good decision. And that's a win-win for both of us. But, like any marketing tool out there, it can be abused. I mean, you can spam people. That's a horrible thing to do. You can lie in your advertisements. You can make claims that aren't true. Terrible thing to do. I don't recommend doing any of those things. Are there some bad players out there that do, some bad actors? Sure. But I think the industry on the whole is better than that. And I think it's the same thing with behavioral science. In the wrong hands, it could be used to manipulate, but in the right hands, it's being used to motivate. If you think about it, we put a message out in the marketplace. One group of people are going to say, "Oh my gosh, just what I was looking for. Sign me up. This is perfect. It came at just the right time." Another group is going to say, "No way, no how. I just don't see how I could possibly use that." Or, "Interesting, but I would never buy from that company because I'm a dyed-in-the-wool customer of this other company." And then there's that middle group. And if you've targeted them properly and you have a good product, they could very well benefit from it, but they got a million things on their mind and so many things, competing for their attention, that it's the company that, or the brand that figures out how to capture their attention, how to succinctly and understandably deliver the message, and how to do it with with a certain amount of urgency so that people decide to respond. They're the ones that are going to get the business, and the ones that fail to do that are going to lose business to their competitors. And it's really that simple. So, so you do want to use it ethically. You do want to use it responsibly. In the right hands, it's one more tool to help you, achieve your goals.
So, as I mentioned, your book mentions several behavioral science techniques. I'd like to review some of those with you now. I've seen you present some of these, and you do a fabulous job, and I'm hoping listeners could catch on. The first one is loss aversion. Can you describe loss aversion and how it's used?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Behavioral scientists have found that people are actually twice as motivated to avoid the pain of loss as they are to achieve the pleasure of gain. But in marketing, we double down on the gains, don't we? We talk about the gains, the advantages, the benefits, all the wonderful things that will happen if you just do what I want you to do. If you just, click on my link, if you just go to my website, if you just become my customer, all this great stuff will happen. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying we should walk away from benefits, but behavioral scientists have found that loss aversion is actually twice as motivating. It's the thing that gets people off the dime, right? We don't want to lose out, right? So we ran a test for a client of ours. They were trying to get people to save more money in their 401k plans at work. And we tested a few different approaches, but one of the approaches was loss aversion. It was the idea of, do you make this money mistake? And that was kind of the overarching theme. And it did the best of all of the things that we tested, right? Because again, we're afraid to make mistakes or missteps or miss opportunities. That really motivates us. So the idea of loss aversion can be very powerful. And again, it's not like we're walking away from the benefits, but just a little well-placed loss aversion, reminding people of the pain they may find themselves in if they don't do what we're suggesting they do, or the pain they can avoid if they do what we're suggesting them to do. Simply saying, don't miss instead of take advantage of can be enough to trigger it, but it can be very, very powerful.
And closely related to that, in the book, you talk about the endowment effect. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So what researchers have found is, if there's something that we want to acquire, something we want to get, well, obviously we value it. That's why we want to get it. But once it becomes ours, we place even greater value on it, right? Once something is ours, we value it even more. It's why if I were going to sell my house and I'd, call a real estate agent up and say, I want to put my house on the market, they'd say, all right, great, Nancy, we're going to run the comps. We'll see what comparable properties, properties your size, your condition, your neighborhood, are currently selling for. And based on that data, we'll know what to put your house on the market for. I'd say, great. They'd call back a little bit later, say, we ran the comps, we're going to put your house on the market for X. And I would say, X? Oh, no, that's too low. It should be more. It should be higher. Why? Because it's my house. I think it's worth more. I value it more because it's mine. I value it more than the data says the market would be willing to pay. But so anytime you can make somebody feel something is theirs, they value it more. So I got a email once from a company that said I had a $15 credit in my account that was going to expire by midnight tomorrow. And the difference between saying we're having a sale until midnight tomorrow, during which we'll give you $15 off, or we'll take $15 off, or we'll send you a $15 rebate. The difference between that and you have $15 in your account that's going to expire is huge. Mathematically, it's the same thing, but psychologically, the world's apart because it was my $15. And if it was going to expire, I was going to lose it. So that's that nice marriage of loss aversion and the endowment effect. I'm valuing it more because it's already in my account, and I don't want to lose it because it's going to expire soon. So that's a very effective way to use those two principles. But, even if you're not giving away credits, using the word imagine is a great way to create the endowment effect, because if you get somebody to imagine what it's like to be benefiting from your product, to be benefiting from your service, they start to think about themselves using it and benefiting from it. And then when they realize, ooh, but I'm not a customer yet, it feels like a loss. Like, oh, all that great stuff I thought I was, I was going to be able to do, I can't do unless I become a customer. So it's a nice way to trigger the idea of the endowment effect.
The next one I have for you is labeling. Can you describe the concept of labeling?
Yeah, it's interesting. What behavioral scientists have found is when you label somebody as part of a group, they start to behave like the other members in that group, even if they hadn't previously thought of themselves as a member of that group. So there was a study that was done in Chicago. The researchers interviewed people before an election, asked them a bunch of questions, and then, having nothing to do with the answers they received, just completely randomly, arbitrarily, they put people into one of two groups. And they went to one of the groups and they said, you guys are the more politically active. And then the researchers just kind of waited until election day, which was a few days later. And what happened was 15% more of the people who were told they were part of the politically active group showed up to vote. So why did they show up to vote? Well, the only difference was they were told they were in the more politically active group. And so what would a politically active person do? They would vote on election day, right? That's what you would do. Now you may say, well, it's only 15%. It wasn't like 100% more went. And that's a fair point. But if you could change just a little language in your marketing materials and immediately realize a 15% bump, it would be worth it, right? So how we label people, whether we tell them they're our best customer, whether we tell them they're a forward-thinking executive, whether we say, they're a business person who's not afraid to buck the trends and try something new, however you want to do that. We did a piece for a company that did patient financing for dentists. So it was a B2B play. We were selling it into the dental offices. And, the problem is all the dentists thought that, one patient financing system was just as good as the next. And most of them already had something. So it was hard to kind of get them to pay attention to this new thing that was out there, because they were like, I've got something ready. I don't need it. And we labeled them as dentists who really cared about their patients. And suddenly that just got them thinking about things differently. We got a 64% increase over the control. The control was their previously best performing piece, but it was just a way to kind of break through. And it's like, oh yeah, I am someone who cares about my patients. And these guys say that they have a program that, for a dentist kind of looks like the same as the other ones, but from a patient perspective has a lot of benefits to the patients. Maybe I should switch. 64% increase for just a little bit of language change.
And the next one I really like is framing. Can you discuss framing?
Yes, absolutely. Framing is the very simple idea that the way information is presented, the words that you use to describe your product, your company, your service, not only convey information, but they influence how people react to the information. I was doing some work years ago with AT&T. We were trying to get people to come back to AT&T. They had left the long distance company. We were trying to get people to come back. And we would offer them 60 minutes of free long distance calling if they would come back. And when people said no, we said, well, all right, how about we give you an hour of free long distance calling if you come back? And people said yes. So, I mean, as we all know, 60 minutes is the same thing as an hour, but framing it as an hour sounded like a better deal. We referred to it as the horizontal flex, because we weren't actually going up and giving them anything more than we originally offered. We were just, flexing horizontally, but it sounded better. So how we serve up information is that, the glass is half empty, the glass is half full, how we phrase something, how we frame it influences how people respond to it.
That's great. And like you said, there are many more of these in your book. I want to encourage everybody to go and read this book. It's tremendous. If what you've just heard has been powerful, you're going to hear a lot more of these types of behavioral science-backed marketing approaches in the book. But just to continue on with some of the questioning, beside those specifics, I wanted to just talk to you about one other thing. You say that instinct and emotion drives action. So I wondered, which brands can you think of actually do a good job of incorporating emotional cues in their marketing?
One of my favorites is General Electric. They do some really interesting things. They did a campaign, this goes back a few years, but I always loved it, where they took certain cliches and they brought them to life and disproved them. So there's a phrase called, that goes like, you don't have a snowball's chance in hell, right? So they created a snowball. Well, they didn't create a snowball. They had a snowball. They made a snowball. They created a container that they could put it in, and then they could lower it into this forge, right? So that this really flaming hot forge. So obviously you think that snowball is going to melt. I mean, it couldn't possibly survive, right? But then they pull it out and they undo this particular mechanism that they created to house the snowball. And there's the snowball, fully intact and frozen. So they were demonstrating their technology, but they were doing it in a really involving way, that provoked curiosity, that tapped into storytelling, that had some emotion involved with it. It wasn't just the technical specifications that allowed them to create, to engineer this product, this container. It was, they wrapped it in a story, so it was incredibly memorable and remarkable. And then there's another one that's maybe not as well known, but it's one that I worked on. It was for a company called Cognos, and they're now owned by IBM, but they make business intelligence software. And the advantage of their business intelligence software was it allowed you to get a full 360 view. So what they found was very often their target market was called upon to make decisions when they didn't have access to all the data. So you did the best you could, but you knew in the back of your mind, you knew that you didn't always have access to everything. And so that would kind of, wear away at you, because you'd wonder, did I make the wrong call? Would I have made a different call had I known such and such a thing? There's this other thing out there, but I didn't have access to it. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know, but I do know that there might be other information out there that could have impacted my decision. But it is what it is. I'm making these calls. And so they had a product that would allow you to get all of the data. It was almost like a sponge. It would pull it all up out of the disparate databases and give you this full view. So you'd have all the information at your fingertips that you would need to make a decision. So in and of itself, that was, a really good product. And they could have just rolled out with that, or they could have done a traditional problem solution approach, but instead they took a very emotional approach. Their headlines were all very empathetic. They had one that said, the antacid for a diet of tough decisions, right? Because if you're making these kinds of calls and you don't have all the data, you probably get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, churns up, or they had another one. It was the delete button for that voice in your head, because again, you're making a call, but you're like second guessing yourself. Oh gosh, but what if? So, they went on to provide the rational reasons to buy the information that you would need to justify the purchase, but they led with a very emotional, very empathetic approach. And to my way of thinking, the target market would see that and they'd say to themselves, wow, if those people really understand my world that well, it's very possible they have something that would be beneficial to me, because they've really demonstrated they know what it's like to walk a mile in my shoes. So those are two examples, one that I was involved with, the first that I was not, where, emotion was really, I think, effectively used in order to accomplish the business goal.
In your experience, is there some behavioral science techniques that are more powerful than others? Are there ones that maybe you tend to incorporate more than others? I'd like to know if there are any super techniques on the list.
Yeah, well, the book has my 25 go-tos, but 25 is a lot. And so you might say, well, how do you decide which ones to use? And is there one that's just kind of the, the omnibus? And it really comes down to what you're trying to accomplish. So you need to think about, right, what's my message? Who's my target market? What's their mindset? So not so much why should they do this, but why might they not do this? And once we get to that very critical question,
Hmm.
why might they not? Then we can start to think about the appropriate behavioral science principles to pull forward. If they may not do it because we're new to the market, no one knows who we are, well, then we might want to use the authority principle, which is that, ever since we were kids, we've been taught to recognize and respect authority. So by the time we're adults, it's ingrained in us. So if a prominent person in the industry endorses us, or, we've been on, we've been featured in Scientific American, or, some major publication, it's like, oh, okay, I haven't heard of them, but Scientific American says they're good, or the American Dental Association says they're good, or, this prominent person, but maybe we say, oh gosh, no, the problem isn't that we're not well known. The problem is, people think we're too expensive. So then, we look at other ways. There's something called magnitude encoding process, which basically says the way we present prices influences how people respond to them. So the more physical space a price takes up, the bigger it seems to be. So, for example, say something was $100, you could say $100 decimal point 00. Or you could say $100. Or you could make your dollar sign half the size of the 100, or you could eliminate the dollar sign altogether. All of those are, working up from taking a lot of space to taking the least possible amount of space. So if you're having a sale and you're talking about what someone's going to save, you want that 100 to take up as much space as possible. If you're talking about the price, you want to take up as little space as possible. So there are all kinds of things that we can do using behavioral science once we kind of identify what those suspected big buying barriers are. So that said, the other easier answer to your question is social proof can be very powerful, because when people aren't certain of what to do, they look to others, they follow their lead. So social proof is a pretty reliable behavioral science principle to use. We talked about loss aversion, which doesn't necessarily come naturally to us as marketers, but framing things in terms of potential loss versus potential gain can be very powerful. So, and then one that I think is underutilized is the idea of rhyme is reason bias. And that's this idea that we find rhymes easier to process because rhyming words are encoded in our brain in near proximity, so they're easier to retrieve, and that's why it's easier to remember things that are rhyming phrases. So like a tagline or a headline or a subject line or a company slogan or motto. But not only are they easier to remember, because it's easier for the brain to process them, it feels right. And when something feels right, it's not a big leap to assume that it is right. So they're more believable. So I think it's an under leveraged behavioral science principle using, headlines or taglines that rhyme, because not only do you call them, out of your memory quickly, but you believe them more. They can actually be more persuasive. So that's one that, it used to be like in the days of Mad Men, everything, there were a lot of those rhyming, taglines. Then they fell out of favor. And now I think they're starting to come up again. And it might just be because I'm interested, so I'm noticing that, but we just came out of the pandemic, and what they say, if it's COVID, Paxlovid, right? They've got the brand name in there. They're making it rhyme with the malady, right? Then Pringles, once you pop, you can't stop. And
Yeah.
what's nice about that is Pringles come in that cylinder that you have to pop open, so it kind of has part of the, the differentiator in the tagline. But I think it's an underutilized opportunity, one that marketers can leverage.
That one's fun. It reminds me of the 80s and the commercials I used to hear and learn as a kid. And they just stuck in your mind, couldn't get out of your head. And so, just to finish up, where can people go to find out more information about you and your book? I follow you on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I've seen you speak in person. But if someone is interested in what they're hearing here, how can they learn more and find out more?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So yes, I'm on Twitter, Threads, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Hmm.
You can come to the agency's website, HBT Marketing. HBT stands for Human Behavior Triggers, and we abbreviate marketing as MKTG. So HBT mktg.com. We have a lot of articles and interviews and podcast recordings on the site, all about behavioral science and how you can apply it, B2B, B2C, various channels. So lots of good stuff there. And then the book, Using Behavioral Science and Marketing, Drive Customer Action and Loyalty by Prompting Instinctive Responses, is available, anywhere fine books are sold. You can get it online at Kogan Page, which is the publisher, at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target. But I encourage you, if you're interested, to pick it up.
Yeah, this book has won awards for good reason. And when you read it, you're going, as a marketer, there's so much practical information. You're going to want to try things one at a time. She's mentioned some of them here, but there's many more and lots of great examples. So I highly recommend it. This conversation has been just wonderful. Thank you so much. It's one of those topics that's challenging, but also has so much potential for all of us. So I appreciate your insights and for you taking the time today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.